word of prayer. Lord God, thank you for giving us this time together, and bless us as we go about looking at your word. In the name of Christ we pray. Amen. Now, Joy, I've got this directed out here. So when you make your comments, you have to say them very loudly. Okay. Yell them out.
Got it. Got it.
Good. Thank you. All right. We're looking at what are we?
Genesis.
Oh yeah, Genesis. Okay, we're looking at different people, sort of a who's who of Genesis, and we're looking at the different characters in the Genesis story. And what last week we looked at what is called the Big Kahuna in Hebrew, and the Big Kahuna is God. Thank you very much. And when we looked at started to look at Genesis, started to look at God, we focused on creation, right? And when we think about the creation, do we have a creation story? We have two creation stories, right? And both of those creation stories not only say different things about the nature of creation, but also say different things about the nature of God that would be really hard to blend into one. Because if you look at the first creation story, which is... No, that's in fact, that's the second. The first creation story has what?
7 days.
It has the 7 days. You know, boom, boom, boom. And in that creation story, we got a pattern, right? And the pattern, you know, we've got 1, 4, 2, 5, 3, 6. You know, that he creates those places and then he creates things to fill the places. You know, so we got, and what does that, and then human beings are the culmination of creation, the last day. So what is that saying about God? What is that first story saying about God? Okay, we got a God of order, a God of structure. Also, we've got a God of... How does he do that? How does he create all this stuff?
He just commands.
Sort of like me at home. You know, I just say it, and I just say it, and I am ignored. You know, so, yeah, cut the grass. Yes. For the second time in her life.
So we should cut the grass.
I know she did. I know she did. She did. Second time in her life. She cut the grass. Yeah, that's why we got a new mower. So anyway, we've got a God of structure, we got a God of power, we got a God of authority, and some of that he kind of gave to us because we bear his image, so we become his representatives. Here, you know, stewards and just representatives. Okay, we got that in the first story. And this God is kind of detached, right? You know, because it's God somewhere. And he, you know, uses the word El or Elohim, which is a good Hebrew word for God or gods. And so, but it's a kind of a God that's not engaged with the nuts and bolts. Second story, though, how is the second story a little different, and what does it tell us about God?
Man's first.
What's that? Human beings are first. The little mud man. The little guy, the little Adam from the Adamah. You know, the little mud guy, you know, that he makes. And we get the image of him making it. You know, making this little mud guy. You know, and then he breathes on the hunk of mud, and it becomes a human being. Yeah, it becomes Kevin Costner. Who named him? Well, see, that's a great point, because when we look at Adam in English, certainly Adam is used as a proper name.
Yes.
It refers to a person named Adam. And in Hebrew, as they tell the story, that's all certainly true, because it's how a person is identified. But the name is kind of a loaded one that would cause us to kind of take a step back and start going, this is very interesting. Because the name Adam has a significance for for Hebrews in the Hebrew language that goes beyond a proper name. It becomes a name for a word that can refer to human. And so if every time we read that second story and substitute the word human for Adam, all of a sudden the story takes on a different meaning, a little slightly different meaning, or has an application beyond an individual. Okay? And that's going to be particularly true what we're going to look at tonight. This becomes not the story of, I think it's more than the story of a person or persons. And it's not my story. It's the story of humanity, of us. And that's why the name becomes really. Adam is grounded in the Hebrew word Adamah. And Adamah means dirt in Hebrew. Dirt. Dirt means dirt.
Is that what you call it, mud man?
That's what we call him Mudman, because that's what he made, and that's why he says, and we'll say, from the dust you came, and to the dust you will return, and that's, remember too, a lot of this stuff that we see in Genesis, I don't think it's bad to envision a father or mother talking to their kids, and the kid says, how come when someone dies, you put them in a ground, in a cave, or put them in the ground, or why do we didn't do that to Uncle Phil, and we kept him around for 2 years, and wasn't much left of him. I thought we could play like we used to, but it wasn't much fun. Why does that happen? And the father could say, "Let me tell you the story of." And all of a sudden we got a story that has a meaning, and that's how stories develop. That's the stories develop around how do you explain this reality that obviously occurred before us, because it's always been that way. What's the basis for it? And all of a sudden we've got this story, that we are physical, we are part of creation, but there's something different about us. But even in that story, God also gives life to the other creatures. So that spirit is that God breathes in, is an animated spirit. It's what enables us to live. And when the spirit returns to God, we die, because the spirit's not here anymore. And we go to the ground. We return to the ground, just like we came from.
How does your church, this church, feel about Catholics? We never
Cremation.
Catholics never did that until just the last 20 years.
Right.
Because I don't know why.
Well, I'm going to give this really short answer, and then because we're going to look at it. I know. All right. Yeah. That's about as short as I could get. Or maybe even shorter. It has to do with resurrection. It has to do with the resurrection of the body. And if the body is gone, then there's nothing to rise later.
Yes.
And so if you burn it up, the body's gone. And Presbyterian Reformed Christians have never had a problem with that, because we're recognizing that future life is different than the present life. Paul talks about that. And therefore, what happens to the body when we expire is not strictly relevant. And so it really doesn't matter. You could do anything to the body. What I'd like is, I want to be stuffed and put on the sofa.
Triggers.
Because
Roy Rogers' horse is stuffed.
What's that?
Roy Rogers' horse.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to have anything to do with Roy Rogers' horse. I just want to be stuffed and set on the sofa, because I know my wife will want to date after I've expired, and I want her to have to deal with me sitting there. Yeah.
Who's that man?
Yeah. That's not moving much. Yeah. And so she'll have to explain that. Yeah. And she'll put me in different.
I asked a little question. Listen to the story about him.
Okay. Well, it's because I have some. I was dropped a lot. Yeah, I know. I was dropped often as a child. often. So anyway, so we've got story of God. We know from looking at those first two stories of creation that we've got a God who has enormous power, enormous authority, is incredibly structured, tells us a universe has structure to it. Things aren't just, random. And we've also got a God that is tremendously compassionate, because he creates human beings first and then creates what? Everything else. And the writer says, for the mud man. Boom, including a little mud lady. Only she's made out of one of the cheaper cuts of meat. Boy,
did that turn around.
If he had just given the mud man more time with the dog, it would have. But that's neither here nor there. We wouldn't be here. All right. So we know something about God, the primary character, and I don't think it's an accident that as they're compiling this book, and this book is compiled later. That's because we've got different strains of writing that are coming from different time periods that have been brought together into this one book instead of separated. It's not an accident that they present the nature of God and the universe first. Now, it's one other little tiny aside. What they've done with Genesis, or what's happened as Genesis has been developed, is just the opposite of what happened with the Gospels. Because with the Gospels, the early church decided, these stories aren't identical, let's have 4 Gospels. We don't want to put them into one mega gospel, have one. We're going to have 4. They do just the opposite with Genesis. They say, instead of saying, well, let's have 3 Genesises, genocides. Instead of having 3 of them, because there are really clearly 3 strains, if not more. Instead of having 3, we're going to have 1, but we're going to bring them together. And sometimes the stories are the same. Like the 2 creation stories. They're not stupid. They recognize the 2 creation, but they say 2 very important things about God. We're going to see something even more dramatic next week when we look at Noah. You're going to have how many animals he took into the ark. I don't know. There's 2 different numbers given. Because there are 2 different stories that are being combined into this one. So, and they knew it. They knew what they were doing. Each of the stories has a meaning, and they want them each to stand on their own. Okay, so anyway, we've got this with God. Now, we don't have to worry about what we're looking at tonight, because they're all coming from one story, one writer. Remember I told you last week that you've got, in chapter 1, God is called El, or Elohim. That's the plural of El. El means God in Hebrew. It's Semitic. That's why Samuel, Daniel, they have El at the end. It has something to do with God. That's the name for God. It's just a noun. In the second chapter, you don't see the word El used at all. Instead, God is called those 4 letters. Those 4 Hebrew letters that you're not supposed to pronounce. And so you say, Lord. You got those 4 letters without vowels that you say, Lord. And so when you read it, it'll say, Lord. And that's how he's identified.
Is it the same N-R? Is that what you're saying, the 4 letters?
What's that?
I-N-R?
Well, I don't tend to say those letters because you'll go to hell if you do. First, that's one of the, if you've ever done it, because the Jews never say it. And I've shared this before, one of the things the Jews believed is if you identified the name, and we see even that in the New Testament, when Jesus casts out demons, he asks for name. He's casting out the demons from the guy, and he says, what is your name? And the demons say, my name is Legion, for we are many. If you use a person's name, you are assuming authority over the one named, which is, we do it in English. If I'm acting in the name of my father, then I'm acting as his agent. I'm assuming his authority in a situation. And so we still carry that. The Jews took that really serious when it came to God, because the name was so meaningful, you were never supposed to say it, because that would be assuming authority over God. And so when the Jews were reading it out loud, when it was read out loud, when they hit those 4 letters, one, they didn't put vowels under those letters. So you really can't pronounce it, because there's no vowels, unless you're Slovak. If you're Slovak, you can't pronounce it. But you can't pronounce it. And instead, they would say the Hebrew word Adonai. And Adonai meant Lord, person of authority. So they were signifying the authority of God without ever saying his name. Well, when it was translated into Greek, and they hit those 4 letters, the Jews that were translating the Hebrew into Greek used the word Kyrios when they hit that. And Kyrios in English means Lord. And so in the New Testament, when Jesus is called Kyrios, Lord, that is not just a person of authority. They are making a profound theological statement about the birth. They're giving him the word used to identify God in the Greek Old Testament. That's a powerful word that's being used. Now, I don't do it because, if the Jews don't do it, I don't want to do it. I'll just say Lord. But those 4 letters for God are used consistently in some of the stories here in Genesis and Exodus.
But what was written on there was cross.
Oh that's different. That's something entirely different.
But it was the same letters.
Yeah, but it's not those letters. It's not those letters.
Forget it.
Yeah, right. That's why they say Jesus. Sometimes people, when they get mad, say Jesus H. Christ, because it looks like there's an H in it, but it's not an H. Okay. All right. So anyway, so we're going to go into this. We're looking at 4 characters tonight, because we looked at God. Who would be the next 2 characters? God created 2 folks, right? Oh, you got to.
What are the 4 letters? Are you allowed to say them?
Well, you could say the letters. You just aren't supposed to pronounce the word. You're not supposed to say the word out loud. Because that's a Jew would never say that name out loud.
What are the 4 letters?
It is a Yah, Haita, Vav, Hittel. No. Yeah, that's it. Those are the letters.
Perfectly clear.
Yeah. They're Hebrew letters. They're 4 Hebrew letters. That you're not. And the Greeks never translated. Usually when they translate the Hebrew words, they would translate it like they sounded.
Those letters are in Scripture?
No.
Oh, okay.
No. In fact, when you read the Psalms, and this is really kind of cool, if you read the Psalms, in most translations, some translations like the Jerusalem Bible, which is an English translation, they don't do that. I don't know why, but they don't. If you've ever noticed when you read the Psalms, and you see Lord written in the Psalms, but it's in all capital letters, that's when it's those 4 letters. When it's all capital letters, in the Hebrew, those are the 4 letters. And so what they're trying to do is they're trying to draw a distinction between he is the Lord of the castle and he is the Lord of the universe, the name for God. And that's whenever you see those 4 capital. That's right.
It's a direct reference to that.
Exactly. As opposed to... Exactly. It is those 4 letters as opposed to the Hebrew word Adonai.
So it's really symbolic.
It is. That's exactly right. So that's how you can tell. Like in NIV and New Revised Standard and King James, that's what they'll do. They'll have those Lord, each of the L-O-R-D capitalized. Usually big capital and then small caps afterwards. Okay, and that's how you can tell. Yeah, which is kind of interesting. I think it's kind of interesting. Anyway, but never mind. We're looking now at something else. We don't have to worry about that. All right, we're looking at 4 people. We're looking at the story of Adam and Steve, and we're looking at Cain and Abel. Yes. Well, what are you looking at me like that?
Adam and Steve.
Oh, Adam and Eve. I'm sorry.
That's an old movie.
It was yes, it was. A kind of mediocre one, too. All right, so at the beginning, but we're looking at these characters. At the very beginning of chapter 2, now at the end of chapter 2, tell me the condition of Adam and Eve.
Great.
Great.
Ain't nothing's wrong.
Everything's great. Things are great. Now, why are things great?
They don't.
Equal.
They don't have.
Okay, they're equal. Yeah.
They were.
What's that?
They were.
Yeah, they were equal. What else makes it great?
Everything was perfect.
Everything was perfect, and in fact, it was so perfect. They didn't want.
They didn't have to worry.
They didn't have to worry because they didn't have to make a decision.
No.
Right? They didn't have to worry. So they are in absolute and complete. Well, yes, actually, yes, Art. I think that's a great analogy. They are totally innocent.
Yeah.
You know, there's no reason to know right from wrong because there's no wrong. That's it. If there's a right and wrong, it only is meaningful if there's something wrong. And if everything is right, hard when you're a teacher trying to grade a test, everybody gets 100, but, then there's still no extra credit. So you've got this total innocent. Now, in chapter 3, who enters the story? Okay, well, who enters the story?
Serpent.
Oh, a serpent. We got a serpent entering the story. Now, understand the identifying the serpent as Satan.
That's wrong.
No, it's going to come later. It's not wrong. It's just it's going to come later. It's not part of the story.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's not part of this story. And there were real good reasons for a serpent to be the villain in the story. Anybody got an idea why a serpent might be a villain?
Because he had that split tongue.
Oh, yeah. Sort of speak with forked tongue. Yeah, I saw a lot of Westerns growing up. Yeah.
Me too. I watched
That
them.
part of the world isn't known for non-venomous snakes.
All right.
It pays you to be afraid of snakes.
So, yeah, snakes. So snakes. Think about the shape of a snake. Long. Yeah. Slithering around. One of the things that what's that?
That's not how it was here in chapter 3.
No. Snakes were important in these in ancient cultures, the Mediterranean culture, Middle Eastern cultures. When people started to settle down and started to raise crops, what kind of God would be really important if you're on a farm raising crops? Okay, rain gods like Baal, which is a storm god.
And the sun god.
Okay, sun god becomes really important. What other god would?
Fertilizer.
A god that has to do with fertilizing. And in particular, the ground being fertile. Earth gods are really a big deal. Storm gods, are important. Like Baal is one of the god of the mountains, the god of the storm. But fertility gods are really important because you want to make your soil fertile. You don't want gods that lead you anymore. That's what makes Hebrews different, and we'll talk about that way in the future. They have the God that leads, but they're shepherds. They're pastoral people, so they want a God that's leading them to green pastures. If you're a farmer, you don't want a God that's leading you anyway. You want a God that's doing what? Bringing stuff to you because you are settled on the land. And fertility is what you want. And that's why female gods are so powerful in the Old Testament. And because of its unique shape, snakes became really important as fertility symbols.
Really?
Absolutely. Snakes became an important fertility symbol. This, by making the serpent the villain in the story, not only, kind of explains, why don't snakes have legs? Well, let me tell you the story. You know, why are snakes on the ground while other animals are walking around? You know, let me tell you the story about this. It's also what? Boom, a little shot at all those fertility religions that always competed with ancient Israel once they settled down. And once the Jews became farmers, maybe we should worship the fertility gods, you know, instead of the God that leads us. You know, maybe we should do that. And there's always that tension within. And this becomes a little subtle shot at the fertility gods.
Oh, that was just...
Yeah. But that, and it makes sense. You know, you want to undercut, you know, your competition, and that's what they do. But they do it in a very kind of a subtle way. Okay, so we've got the serpent, but the serpent is what? How is the serpent described?
More subtle.
It is more subtle. You know, so it's kind of a compliment. You know, backhanded compliment, but subtle in a sort of a distorting way, right? And what does the serpent say? And the serpent speaks to who first? Speaks to the woman. Frankly, because the woman may be smarter than the guy. We'll look at how the temptation goes. So the serpent is talking to the woman, and the serpent says what to the woman?
Taste the apple?
Well, not yet. Because the serpent is subtle. Is more subtle than, go eat that apple.
Questions God's word.
Okay, kind of questions God. And it's interesting. Did God say,
Don't eat from that tree.
you shall not eat from any tree in the garden? Well, the answer, we've read the second chapter. The answer to that is, no. God never said that. You know, but, you know, because we know what God said. God said, you can eat from every other tree, but the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, you shall not eat, for in that day you shall eat and die. So, you know, now, when it says the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, what does that mean?
It means it's paradise. In other words, there is no good or evil.
Okay, so what would that tree then represent?
Good and evil.
Okay, but what does it, okay, true, represents good and evil. How does it relate to human beings?
It's mortality, it's everything.
Okay, yes, it's everything with that tree. All of a sudden, once you eat, and God said, don't do it, because you're going to die. It's not that I'm going to kill you because you disobeyed me, but all of a sudden, once you do that,
Get ready.
everything has changed.
You become aware.
You become aware. You cease to participate in that eternal nature of God. Because now you're aware. Now you have to do something that God doesn't have to do. Now you have to do what?
Make choices.
You have to make choices. And the choices you have to make are between good and evil, right? And everything you look at, everything, you have to now make that choice. It is unbelievable bondage. It's not freedom. It's bondage because we are constantly having to make choices.
And we always find good in certain things, but there's bad too.
It is never easy, and Paul even says, you know, remember we looked at that back in the 7th chapter of Romans. Paul says, I always make bad choices. You know, I look at the situation and I know what I should do, but I don't do it, you know, which means I'm screwed up, you know, and that's kind of what he says. And this is what's talking here. It's not that if you eat there, you disobey me, boom, I'm coming on you.
Yeah.
But you disobey me, all of a sudden you're not participating in me anymore. And the connection between us is broken. And you will participate in everything else in creation. You cease to be that unique. You seek to have that uniqueness. Now, I'm not calling it image of God because that's a different story. But you cease to have that uniqueness. That means you don't retain the Spirit, my Spirit, indefinitely. Which is really my intention for you. But again, remember, this is a story. He's not trying to write history. He's writing story to explain something. Okay, so that's what we know. So she's, kind of fudging it, which kind of tells us the direction it's going to go. It gets even worse, or he is, kind of distorting. What she says is even more distortion, because how does she respond?
She eats it and runs.
But not yet. He says, you know, did God say you shall not eat from any tree in the garden? And her response is, we can eat from all the trees, right? But God said, you shall not eat from the fruit of the tree that is in the middle of the garden. Are we okay? Yeah. And then she decides to add something of her own to it. Then she says, nor shall you touch it, or you shall die. Where did she get touch it? Where did that come from?
Because she touched it.
Because she made it up.
Oh,
She made it up. You know, right there she's adding to the story, and we got a problem. Because what is she doing?
Embellish.
In a sense, she's embellishing. If you want to call it a lie, I think that's reasonable. If you want to call it an embellishment, that's reasonable too. She's changing God's word, right? Which is kind of dangerous when you start monkeying around with it. Because God never talked about not touching the tree. As soon as though she starts distorting God's word, the serpent, because the serpent is crafty, as soon as he hears her distort God's word, man, he's smelling blood in the water. And what's that?
That's his goal.
Oh, that's all he wants, is for her to distort it a little bit. And once she's distorted it, what does the serpent say? Oh, yeah, you're not going to die? Are you kidding me?
But
For one, you're not going to die because you know God loves you so much.
Did they know what die meant?
Well, I think the people who are reading this know.
Did Eve?
I don't know that Eve in the story knows. But I do think the audience that's reading this story, they really know what death is. Yeah. They really know what death is. I think we can make the assumption that because they're applying themselves, they're putting themselves in the story, that we might be able to assume that Eve knows. That death is this absolute separation from God and his nature. So you're not going to die. In fact, when you eat it, what'll happen?
Your eyes will be open.
Your eyes will be open,
You'll know the difference.
and you'll know good and evil, and you'll be like God. You know, and this, if you want to, the reason Satan is connected, or the devil becomes connected to this, and this is again profoundly theological. This is what the devil does. You know, there's a lot of truth in what he said. There's a lot of truth in what he said. You know, God does love. And her eyes were opened, right? And she did know good and evil. All of that's true. What isn't true is you will be like God. You will be like God. You know, all the rest is okay. But it's right there. And what is the serpent saying about God? If this is his motivation, and he says, don't eat from this tree, because if you do, you'll be like me. What is that saying about God? God must be, what's that? Must be human, right? The way we see humans, right? God must be an egomaniac. I don't want anybody else like me. You know? All of a sudden, we've got that idea introduced into the nature of God. Wasn't there before, right? But all of a sudden, that is introduced. You know, it becomes appealing because her eyes are going to be open and she'll know good from evil. And she assumes, he's hoping she assumes, that's what God is like. You know, that's what God is like.
he still does that today. To me, I say,
Yes.
he takes it away from us worshiping God and centers on me.
Absolutely.
Who I'm going to be.
And you know,
Who he is.
80% of what he says is true.
Absolutely.
80% of what he says is true. And that's why we get tripped up. We expect to see the guy with horns and hooves and a tail.
Always presents them.
Yeah, because I can identify that in a heartbeat. If he says, Ed, go home and kill your family, I'm not tempted by that. But if he says, you know, Ed, go and spend, you know, because you really deserve it. You work really hard. And, you know, even though there are bills to pay, you know, you deserve to get that autographed helmet. You know, you should buy that. And it's not that much anyway. You know, and you'll enjoy it. And you know what? You'll be a better husband because you'll be happier and more relaxed. You know, is he right? Bits and pieces of it are right. You know, it's like the joke I sent out today where the poor minister, poor pastor, country pastor, and all country pastors are poor. His wife buys this really expensive dress.
What?
This really expensive dress. And he says, don't you know we're poor and I can't afford it? And the wife says, I just couldn't resist it. And he says, when you're in those situations, what you need to do is you need to say, get behind me, Satan. And she said, I did. And he told me it looked good there too. And that's what Satan does. You know, that's what Satan does.
Well, I want to know something.
Yeah.
Satan was a snake there.
Well, that's what he's later going to be.
Oh,
Yes.
Aren't they
Yeah.
describing it?
Well, they are describing this figure. Again, the idea that the serpent is Satan is going to come much, much later.
In the original story.
In the original story, it wasn't. Because, for one,
He was just
one of the things when you look at these different levels, these different approaches, these different stories that are within the Genesis story, some of them are earlier than others. And one of the ways you can kind of see how, and you can see it by the whole movement of the Bible, the Old Testament. The earlier stories have a God that is far more intimately involved in creation. It's a God that walks in the garden. It's a God that makes people out of dirt. It's a God that shows up at Abraham's tent. It's a God that is really, really close. As you go on, God becomes a little more distant. So you have in the creation story in chapter 1, you got a God that is not shaping the earth with his hands. It's a God that does what?
Tells people what to do.
Commands it. Boom. Let there be light. Bang, and there was light. As you go on, you get this God that's a little less connected, and that kind of makes sense. Because as you go on and you live, bad things happen to good people. Things happen you can't explain. There's not, God isn't walking around. You can't invite him in for dinner. He's not a human being. He loses those human qualities and becomes more the ruler and architect of the universe. And that's a real big difference. But it's a developing difference. It doesn't all come at once. And what you see in the stories in Genesis and Exodus is you've got those perspectives sort of blended in together. There'll be another one that God will come in visions. This guy who writes this, God shows up. He is there. The other one is they see God in a vision. Well, God is still close, but see, it's a little detached. Now he's coming in visions. And then you've got ones that they don't see him at all, but they know he's there. And that's kind of the development. And so if you want to sort of date them, that's kind of the way it's flowing.
Then he begins to use prophets.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Then he's speaking to other people because he's not here in this story. He didn't need to speak to a prophet. He's right there. And as we'll see in just a second, let's go on with the story, and I'll show you exactly what I mean. The serpent says that, and what does the woman do? Now the woman has a choice. But only because she set it up. She set up that choice. Yeah, well, what did she... So she is in this situation. And what does she... Innocence is at stake here, right? And what does she choose to do?
I think she felt guilty, so she wanted to take him down with her.
Well, if he wanted to take who down? The snake?
No, Adam.
Oh, Adam. No, before that, she looks at the tree, right? And look at how he describes it. These are good writers. She looks at the tree and she sees what? Man, the fruit on that tree looks good. And man, that tree is beautiful. And think of all the stuff I can do if I am smart. And so what is she doing? Even before she eats the fruit, she is... making the decision. She's setting her out for it. She is defining that tree as what? Eating from that tree as good. Now, she started that process by distorting God's word at the beginning. But now she's looking at it and she's saying, this is a good thing. The result is inevitable. What does she do? She eats it. She eats it. And then she does what? Gave it to Adam, and Adam, being a man, all she has to do. She put up some resistance. You know, she gave it to Adam. What did Adam do? You know, yeah, Adam just... Actually, she made it into a popover. And Adam didn't realize what it was until it was too late.
What kind of oven was it?
What's that? What kind of oven? God's oven.
The sun.
Yes, the sun. Yeah, it was an easy bake oven. Yes, thank you for that. Light bulb did great things in the past. Okay, so she ends up, and this becomes kind of a human story, doesn't it? You know, that we are forced to make these decisions. You know, we are constantly forced, and they do it. And as soon as Adam, and it says as soon as they've eaten, both of them have eaten, what happens? Their eyes open. They get what they want. Her eyes are now open. Say that serpent was 100% right. Their eyes were open. They are no longer innocent. They see the world for what it is. And what is the first thing they see? Nakedness. And that ain't good. You know.
They always had to know they were different.
Well, but they see, but what they saw, they were naked. And what do they do? First thing they do, they try to make clothes. They try to. Didn't know shame. No reason to feel shame because there's no right or wrong. But as soon as their eyes are open and they can define right from wrong, they look at themselves and they say, we are wrong.
And nobody told them that.
That's right. We're running around and we should buck naked, which is only allowable in Florida when you've had a lot to drink. You know. We are buck naked, and that is bad. And so the first thing they do is they make some clothes for themselves out of leaves. And then when they hear God coming, because he walks, and he walks when it's cool. He's no fool. You know, he ain't walking in the heat of the day. Only mad dogs and Englishmen do that. Now, he's walking in the cool of the evening. And so when they see him coming, they hide. They hide. They hide. And so innocence is gone, and what's replaced it?
But he asked them a question.
Shame. Yeah, before. And so what is the condition of Adam and Eve now?
Scared.
They are scared. They are hidden. Ashamed. They are ashamed. They're ashamed.
They threw it all away.
And what happens? Well, remember, this is the story of humanity.
It would have happened without it.
Yes. That it's just like Pandora's box. How did evil come into the world? That didn't make any sense. Well, there was a box. And why did she open it? Because she was told not to. And human beings are curious. And what's the source of all evil in the world? Human curiosity, which also results in great things. And so you don't want to destroy human curiosity because that results in wonderful things. But on the other side of the coin, you end up with everything that's evil and distorted coming from that same source. And in a sense, that's what we've got right here. The kid is saying to his dad, Dad, why do I keep on making mistakes? Son, let me tell you the story of Adam and Eve. Because this is our story. This is why we have to make this choice. You know, each of us don't want Adam and Eve coming into life innocent, making a choice. This is the story of humanity. We do this. This is our world. We make choices. That's right. This is part of our nature. You know, this is part of our nature. We have to make choices. As soon as we're functioning, man, we're making choices.
Does it say? It doesn't say that everything in the garden was punished.
No. In fact, we're going to get there in just a second. All right. So now we got a conversation between God and Adam, and tell me about that conversation. And I love this conversation.
Yes, where are you?
Yeah, where are you?
And he said, I heard you.
Yeah.
But I was afraid because I was naked and hid myself.
Yeah. And then he says,
Who told you that?
who told you that? But God knows. What? Then what does he ask?
Did you eat from the tree?
Have you eaten from the tree that I commanded you not to eat? And man, and again, I don't think this is unintentional, because this shows human nature. What is the first thing when confronted by God? Did you eat this fruit? What does the man say? She did it. She did it. I was innocent. I was just there. She gave me this tiny little piece. And, and it looked like a pear. I thought it was a pear, And she gave it to me and I ate. And God turns to her and says, Eve. And Eve's response is, oh, it's a snake. The snake made me do it. And the tricked me. The snake tricked me. Well, did the snake trick her? No. Heck no, the snake didn't trick her. But that's part of human nature now. We are going to look to blame anybody but ourselves.
Sure.
And why do we do it? Because now we have to choose between good and evil, and that's what we'll end up choosing. That's what we'll end up choosing.
Evil.
We'll choose this kind of distorted thing, because I'm not sure we can ever choose pure good anymore. Yes, because everything now becomes gray, becomes this mixture, of good and evil, because now we got motivation involved. Not just pure action, but we got motivations and emotions and all kinds of things. I gave her a present, so she wouldn't be mad at me. And, now is that a good act? Well, the present is, I'm giving it because she'd be mad at me if I don't. Well, that seems sort of self-serving, so is it a true gift or it's now it's complicated. The world is complicated. It was easy. Now it's not easy anymore. So God has to start doing what? Dishing out punishment, right?
Depending on how serious it was.
Well, dishing out punishment. Serpent?
Yeah.
What?
It's cursed.
You're cursed. Which is kind of cool if he is giving an elbow to these fertility gods, because now the Lord is it's above, cursing all these things you worship. Boom, a little. Why do you think the medical symbol has snakes wrapped around? It's not because they use snakes to distill medicines. It had religious significance in the Greek world. So, but God is above, right? Boom, you are cursed. And in fact, the very reason they worship you is the curse. Because now you're not walking around on legs anymore. You're crawling on the ground. You're a phallic symbol. That's what you are. And that's the curse. And not only is it a curse, but women, the one that you talk to first, man, she is going to be after you to step on your head. You're going to bite her heel and she's going to step on your head. So there's going to be an animus between women and snakes, which again becomes an interesting shot, because you had priestesses in these fertility cults. You didn't have priests, you had priestesses. Because you don't go to a priest if you want your soil fertile. You go to a woman because she is fertile, So, you go to her. And so this is a shot at the whole religious system. But we're not done yet. So what about to the woman? Now, clearly the curse to the women is not nearly as rough as the one to the men. All the women are cursed. What's the only? Childbearing, which is a joyous occasion. Is a wonderfully joyous occasion. And what else? Your husband will boss you around. Your husband's going to boss you around, which...
I've tried that.
Yeah, I know. We've come a long way.
One good thing.
Yeah, that's right. But don't even get that. But then what's the curse? What's the curse for?
That part.
What's the curse for the man?
Working.
You're going to have to work and work and work. And remember at the beginning in chapter 2, God loved him so much he planted a garden. and put them in a garden. Well, now they're going to have to work. Now the man's going to have to work. And
It's not paradise anymore.
it's not paradise anymore. And in fact, you came from the dust, and there's going to be a time when I'm going to withdraw my spirit, and you're going to return to the dust. And that's going to be your curse. Your innocence is over, but you'll have the opportunity to choose good from evil.
How long were they in heaven? I mean, how long was heaven like that?
68 years and 4 months.
You mean you never read it somewhere that you don't get?
Why would you question my number? Yeah.
Because I'm older than
64 years and 7 months.
I'm older than
Yeah.
and I wasn't around when it was happening.
Well, because 66 is a holy number. And so it's 5, so 66 and 5
I apologize.
and 5. So yeah. All right.
Why do I even talk to him?
How about
Yeah.
this? There probably wasn't any time. Nobody knows. It was
Yeah.
paradise. You don't need a watch.
Actually, it was a casino, because I think there are half a dozen casinos called Paradise, around the United States. It's called wordplay.
Now you're talking.
Yes. Now I'm talking. Yeah. Okay. So anyway, they are cursed, but what else? Now.
Loved by God.
Yeah. Well, now this is kind of interesting, because you would think God would be really ticked off, and he sure sounds ticked off. And he also does what to him?
Cast them out of the
That's God.
Kicks him out.
Kicking him out of the garden. Boom! Kicked out of the garden. And yeah, that's what he's doing right there. And he puts an angel so you can't come back in, and they are out. Right? And we all know the Garden of Eden is in Fulton, Missouri. So he's been kicked out. They have to go to Illinois, and nobody wants to go to Illinois, and then Detroit. It's a bad scene.
Bad.
It's bad. So they are kicked out of the garden, and our Mormon brothers and sisters believe the Garden of Eden was somewhere around Fulton, Missouri. But they're kicked out, and God makes sure they can't go back, and he's cursed the ground, and he's given them childbirth pain and all this stuff. And Art, that sounds like he's really mad at him, right? And the human beings, remember, they're all ashamed, and they're trying to cover up. They're really mad.
Adam and Eve.
Yeah. But what does God do?
He doesn't.
Huh?
Make clothes.
He made them clothes.
He made them clothes.
He made them clothes.
You shed blood, killed an animal.
And made
Is
them
that
clothes.
right?
Before that,
I didn't read that. You're smart, sister.
She is smart. Real smart. Now, what is that showing? Why? You got that sort of at the end that you could say, geez, we're really on God's bad side now. But he makes them clothes. He takes part of what he made that carried his spirit, slaughters it to make clothes.
Now for them.
Well, remember, what are they feeling? What's their feeling? Shame. What does God do for them? He covers their shame. He covers their shame. Now, does it mean the shame is gone? No. But it's a
When
sign.
do they know that they can make babies?
It's a sign of grace. Well, that's part of the curse, that she has this childbirth, but she also desires her husband. So again, talking little boy. Where do babies come from? Well, let me tell you the Genesis story. That's what this is.
Yeah.
And so Adam and Eve are now what?
Human.
They are out on their own. They are human beings. They are out of Eden. They are going to have to make decisions for themselves. What is their condition? What is the condition of Adam and Eve? They've grown. That's it. They've grown up. They've grown up. And that's, again, I don't think that theologically we can say, oh, this is a good thing. This is, again, a story to explain why we are what we are. We are grown up. We have to make decisions. Why do we have to make decisions? Why doesn't God make decisions for us? Because because story. We just don't. This is what happened. Now, becomes really important because later, and I used to do a presentation called The Bible in 90 Minutes. I could do the entire Bible in 90 minutes.
In character?
No, not in character. That way I'd be too many costume changes.
As a character.
Although I play one heck of a Jezebel, but that's neither here nor there. What I do is Bible in 90 minutes. Bible in 90 minutes. 90 minutes.
We want to see it.
And you want to see it? Well, I got it down to the fastest I ever did it was 55 minutes.
What? The Bible?
The Bible in 55 minutes. Now, what did you say?
Why can't you just do it for us and we can get out of here? I'm serious.
Well, why does Exxon not release that gasoline or better than that, why doesn't the General Electric release the light bulb that never burns out? Why would they do that? Because it never burns out. If I say that, then y'all will never come again. I've lost all of you. I'm lonely. I'm sitting here by myself, me and the turtles. Talking to myself, which I do anyway. But see, I think there are 4 signs, and it's from the Genesis. You have a sign, you have human action, consequences, and grace. And you have it 4 times. You have it in this story. Well, we'll have it in the next story we'll look at quickly, Cain and Abel. You have it in the story of Noah. No, it'd be 4. Yeah, 4.
What about that one with it?
And then the Tower of Babel. And you have those 4 stories in Genesis. And it's a decline. As the person, or rise, if you want to say seriousness, it goes up. But human nature is in decline in each of those stories. Because the Tower of Babel, they want to be God. They assume they build a big enough tower, they're going to be God. Reach out to God, and they'll be giving God instructions. So it's the word, they kind of go downhill. And each of the first 3, there's a sign of grace. Here we've got God making clothes. There's always consequences. You're separated from the garden. But God makes you feel shame, but God makes you clothes.
Is that why the cavemen wear fur?
No. You've got the story of Cain and Abel, sign given, the mark given to Cain. You've got Noah's story, boom, you got a rainbow. And an ark floating on the water. Sign of grace. Then you got the Tower of Babel, which is really fascinating. Because if you look at those 4 stories, Tower of Babel, they're scattered all over the world. And they can't communicate with one another. They've lost any kind of unity they have. There's no sign of grace at the end of the Babel story. But in chapter 12, and the Babel story is in chapter 11 of Genesis. In chapter 12, a new person is introduced.
The Tower of Babel, I've heard it's the beginning of false religions.
Well,
In some cases.
but no grace. There's no grace. All of a sudden, in chapter 12, you've got a man introduced. And his name was Abram. And it's going to be through Abram that the curse of Babel is reversed. And I think, and I believe that this is a pattern in the whole of Scripture, coming from different writers. When you look at it, there's a reversal of Babel until you get to a recreation of Eden. What John talks about, the new creation. So you have a new creation where there's absolute and complete freedom, because again, you're not burdened with having to make a decision. Everything is right. Everything is good. So there is no bad. And that's perfect freedom. You're not burdened to have to choose. Yeah, that's right. You're not burdened because everything is good. And I think that's how you have a reversal. So you have going down, and then instead of that sign of grace, we have God working through one man, who eventually lead to Moses, lead to David, lead to Jesus, and the beginning of the resurrection of the dead. And I think there's a nice little, it's called in literature, it's called a chiasm, where you have it's a flow like that. or flow like this, where you come to sort of a crisis and then you work it out.
Yes.
And it parallels up. And I think that's what you see in Scripture.
Yes.
And I think it's an intention. And I think, in fact, Luke really understands it. I think Luke really sees that pattern. Because I think that's what he works with in the Gospel of Luke and Acts. I think it's very cool.
Two things, actually.
Yeah.
I often will say that we don't like to use the word evolution, but God's plan evolves.
Absolutely. Yes.
It evolves. Yeah.
Absolutely. That is exactly right. Only it's not a physical evolution, it's a
Right.
moral
It's
evolution
God's
and a
plan.
spiritual evolution. Yeah, that is exactly right.
So what's our future coming? What's going to be our future?
What is going to be our future? Ultimate future?
Yes.
Hands of God. New heaven and a new earth. For the first heaven, well, no, that's what I'm saying. New heaven and a new earth. For the first heaven and earth had passed away and there was no more sea, no more confusion. Symbol of chaos. No more chaos. That's the ultimate future. That's what, now, what does that mean? I don't know. He's using metaphorical language. I don't know what that means. But I know that if I look at the metaphor, that's pretty darn good.
Yes.
The images he uses are pretty comforting images. So I believe that's it. That's in the future. But what it actually is, do you take it literally? You could. That's okay. I don't think that's the best interpretation, but if that makes you feel good, comfortable in the future, I got no problem with it. Whatever it is, it's a heck of a lot better than what we're living now. And it's in God's hands, and it's inevitable. And that's what's the best of all. It's inevitable. It's not up to us. It's up to God. And it's already decided. Geez, the book has already been written. That's on the last page. But the book is written. We just don't know what's on the next page from us.
That's right. That's good.
That's what we don't know. But the end of it, sure, we know that. Sure. Okay, so we got this situation with Adam and Eve. They've lost their innocence. They immediately have two bouncing baby boys, right? Named what?
Cain and Abel.
Cain and Abel. And if I had twins, boys,
Cain and Abel.
Cain and Abel. Yeah. Or Rehoboam, Jeroboam. Or, I thought would be really cool, name one of them Arnold, and name the other one Benedict. That would be really kind of cool. Yeah, no, it would be really neat. Anyway. So there we go, and we've got we've got a story. So we don't want to get bent out of shape. I know so many Christians, they get all bent out of shape. Where did Cain and Abel get wives? La 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 la. Oh, big deal. Who cares? These are stories. We're not told these are stories. Who cares where they got wives? Then he's not describing history. It's not like two people wandering on the earth. Remember the first story, creation story, he created men, plural, and women, plural. They weren't worried about that. But this is a story. Cain and Abel. And he tells us about Abel. And Abel is what?
Keeper of the sheep.
Keeper of the sheep. And Cain is? Tiller of the soil. So Cain grows stuff. Now, and Abel is a shepherd. Not a surprise, because the Hebrew people are going to be what? Yeah, they're going to shift places. They're going to be shepherds. They're going to have flocks. So if somebody's going to be a villain, it sure isn't going to be the shepherd. It's going to be the farmer who's worshiping the fertility gods. So, not a shocker we're kind of set up for that. We got the two. Now, what do both of them do? Now, we know it's coming from the same source because God is named. What's the name of God in this? Jehovah, Lord. Jehovah is an interesting word. Jehovah is a fascinating word. Jehovah, people think Jehovah is Jewish. It isn't a Jewish word. Jehovah is not a Jewish word. If you take the 4 letters for God and take the vowels in the word Adonai, because remember those 4 letters have no vowels. You take the vowels in the word Adonai and put them to those letters, you get Jehovah. So you take the consonants from one word and combine the vowels from another word, you get Jehovah. But it doesn't mean anything in Hebrew. It means nothing. It's 2 words that have been combined. If you want to do it, you do, but you're creating a false word, a word that doesn't exist. So it gave us the ability to pronounce those 4 letters, though, by combining it. And if a person wants to do it, it's not a big deal. It's just not a real word. Okay, so we've got, but if Jehovah or the Lord or Yahweh, if you want to say it, but Lord, I like Lord, because you're not supposed to say the other stuff. And you really can't pronounce it anyway. I can. So we've got, so in course of time, and we don't know why, they don't explain it, because the writer doesn't care about explaining it. He's not writing about the origin of offerings. Course of time, they both decide to do what? Make an offering to God, right? And again, we don't know why. He just says that's what they decide to do. And the farmer, of course, offers what? Fruit of the ground. If one had been a weaver, he would have offered fruit of the loom. But it is fruit of the ground. And the shepherd offers what? Okay, offers, yes, little cuddly animals.
Disgusting.
Little cuddly animals. Not unlike your Bishams. I'm sorry. But offering animals, right? And, God, now remember, he's writing this to people who do what? Sacrifice animals, right? Duh. They're sacrificing animals. So, which one does God accept?
The animal.
Duh. The animals. He doesn't regard the fruit of the ground. He regards the animals. Why does God regard the animals? Why does he accept that offering and not have any regard for the offering of plants?
I don't know, but to me it's the shedding of the blood.
It's
the beginning of when you go back to even where he shed the blood, covered the sin, you take that all the way through the scripture, it was the shedding of Christ's blood. The blood is the removing of in the blood is the lifeline.
Right. Certainly that's going to be in Leviticus. That's going to be the focus in Leviticus. Shedding blood.
Is that the reason?
It's
the shedding of the blood.
One of the things that I am a firm believer in, and you all know that, is the importance of sneezing every now and then. That's how the Spirit is released. But outside of that, if the writer wants us to know it, the writer will what? Tell us. I think in this case, based on again what God says later, we don't know. It just is. Now, why might that become a lesson in and of itself? This was accepted and this wasn't. You don't figure God out. Some things you just can't explain.
At that moment.
Yeah, at that moment. You don't know. At that moment, yes. At that moment. That's when the father's teaching the kid. Why did I did this and why did God seem to bless Joey and not me? Well, you know something? We can't predict God. We don't control God. And sometimes those things happen. Yeah.
I'm thinking, too, it could be a foreshadow of things to come, the sacrifice of an innocent lamb.
Oh, sure. Absolutely. And that...
Looking forward to the sacrifice and the death of Christ.
We're going to get that. We're going to get that but it's going to be strong in Leviticus. And it's going to be articulated. In Leviticus and Deuteronomy, it's going to be really, really strong. And the evangelist John is really going to pick that up as he writes his gospel. So I think you're entirely right. In this case, he doesn't mention it. And I think that's a good thing, because what it does is it creates an animosity between the two brothers that's not based on anything they could possibly know.
Now, Cain has to make a decision.
Yeah, that's exactly right. But Cain now, we know Adam and Eve, his parents, felt shame. Now Cain feels anger. That's what it says. Cain feels anger. It says his countenance fell. Now, I think this is really, really cool. Cain feels anger. Now, he hadn't done anything, right? Hadn't done anything, just anger. What does God say to Cain? He says, why are you so ticked off? Then what does he say?
If you done well, you shouldn't be so
Yeah,
upset.
yeah, don't worry. Understand, sin is lurking at the door.
Sin is what?
Lurking at the door.
Oh.
You've got to master it, which tells us immediately that, or tells me, that the anger Cain is feeling is not the sin. It's what he's going to do with the anger. So I've said, and I say that a lot. It's not what you feel. What you feel is what you feel. It's what you do as a result of the feeling. You know, we've been talking about anger. Man, you're going to feel anger. That's why you need to take a break. You need to take a step back. You need to exercise. Because if not, you're going to do something what?
Dumb.
Stupid. Dumb. You're going to do something dumb. You know, if you don't, pause. You know, you're going to do it dumb. But you say it in Hebrew, it sounds more spiritual. Okay, so Cain, God warns him, you know, you're angry. Sin is, that's exactly what sin wants. And Cain says, yeah. And then he does what? And this is horrible. It is worse than him just killing his brother. What does he do?
Lies to God.
Yeah, of course he lies. Even before he does that, though. Even before he does that. Come on, Abel. Let's go out to the field.
What, to the beach?
Yeah. It's not like he gets so angry, a crime of passion. This isn't a crime of passion. This is premeditated. You know, this is premeditated murder. This isn't just getting ticked off and killing his brother because he's mad at him. Which is all right. You know,
Not a reflex.
it's not a reflex action. Yeah, it's not like, it's not like chopping a tree and saying oops. Or in some cases, not involving my family, but some, one of those big chippers, and having a neighbor that you just hate reach in to clear out
He should have done something.
Oops.
yes, or a large plant when you get caught, lying about the dentist. It's not like that. Anyway, so he says, let's go out to the field. I've got a new flower to show you out there in the field.
I think you're
It is
adding
real.
that.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I think I'm adding that too. Or it may have been, hey man, I saw some plants over there. You put them in primo, right? Yeah, I'm kind of adding to it. But he says, come out of the field, and when he comes out into the field, what does Cain do? Kills him, right?
Yeah.
And as soon as he kills him, what does God say?
Where's your brother?
Cain, where's your brother? And Cain says,
My brothers can't lie.
I don't know. Yeah, it's not my job to look after him.
So we got shame, lying, murder, sin. Oh yeah.
Jealousy, murder. All those things that make life worth living. And so he.
I know, that's what
Now, but
I'm reading past.
I think that's really important that he does it, because the writer's telling us we don't want to focus on that.
Okay.
We don't want to focus on that. Now he is telling us there's premeditation. So clearly, and that's more important than he picked a rock up and killed him.
I was just curious if there was some kind of symbolic, once again, like with the shot to the
yeah, doesn't seem to be.
Okay.
Doesn't seem to be. But and remember, and we've talked about that before. When all of this is written, it's being written on the skins of reeds or animals. Usually the skins of reeds, because that was cheaper. But it was written on the skins of reeds. This is expensive stuff. So a writer couldn't. I get wordy when I write. And so I have to go back and take stuff out because I get really wordy. And that's easy when you're using a computer because it doesn't cost you anything to be wordy. But these guys had to be concise. They couldn't, so they were very careful what they included and what they didn't. And therefore, when you see what they include, that's what causes you to open up. When you see something that doesn't have to be there, but it is, that kind of makes you think, why did he put that there? Because he sure didn't have to. He could have told the story without Cain. He could have just jumped to, Cain rose up against his brother and killed him. He could have done that. Killed him with a rock. He could have done that. But he doesn't. He has to introduce it by saying, come to the field. He didn't have to do that. So it must be that the writer wanted us to know that there was premeditation involved, which knocks out, kind of interesting choice of words, accidents. This wasn't an accidental killing. Because in the law is going to deal a lot with accidents, and this is written really after the law, about a time before the law, but it's written after the law. They're living with the law. So they don't want to get gummed up. He accidentally killed his brother, pushed him in a hole, sold him to Ishmaelites, that kind of stuff. You don't want to do that. All right, so God responds, and he says, I don't know. My job isn't to look after him anyway. You like him so much. How does the Lord respond? I know what you did. I know what you did. And I know what you did because your blood is crying out from the ground. And that is really a powerful shot. His blood is crying out for the ground, and the ground is what Cain tills. The very thing from which Cain gets his identity is now cursing, mocking. Now you think things were hard. You ain't seen nothing yet. Because now what? You are cursed. The ground is going to curse you.
This also is the first example of death.
Yes. And it's murder. It's fratricide, which is bad. But it almost would have to be. I mean, who else is he going to kill? Not a whole lot of people wandering around. But
what God told him would happen, death. This is now.
This is it, and it's because of them. Your choice. Right. It's not cancer. Right. It's your choice, and now it's going to be cursed, and you're going to try, and you ain't going to get much. It's going to be hard. Life is going to be tough for you. And how does Cain respond? Again, action, consequence. How does Cain respond?
It's more than I can do.
I can't do it. I can't do it. But it's interesting. Why does he say he can't do it? He doesn't say I can't do it. I don't work that hard. I can't do it. Tilling the soil will be too tough. I can't do it because I love the ground, and now the ground is my enemy. He doesn't say that. Why can't he do it? Why does he say this is too much for me to bear? Which is an odd thing to say given where the story is at this point. When I go out and start wandering, what?
Somebody's going to take aim at an enemy.
Yeah, somebody's going to kill me. Now, understand, how many people have we got introduced into this story to this point? 4.
Yeah.
Who the heck is he talking about? Eve's going to be searching for him? That's why you don't look at his history. You don't worry about that. That's not a big deal because that's not why he's writing the story. Well, no, we don't think about that. Clearly he's worried that he recognizes raising crops is going to be hard now. And in fact, so hard he's going to be a wanderer. And he's going to have to go to places and move from one to another, place to another. But the biggest threat is that somebody's going to kill me. And again, we got this sign of grace. Unnecessary grace. What does he do? What does God do?
Puts a mark on him.
Puts a mark on him.
What do you think that? That's an interesting thing. People always ask, okay, what's that mark? What did God mark? What was the mark, first of all, that they would see, that they knew that they were killing in the first place? And then what was the mark that God put on him that they wouldn't kill him? Which is, again, like you said, the whole gospel from the very beginning.
Exactly. That this is, you're going to pay the consequences. You've done wrong. And there are consequences for your actions, and they are really bad. So I'm not like an indulgent father that says, well, I'm giving you a warning this time. But next time, Bob, next time, That's not, there are consequences, but I still love you enough to give you a sign. A mark of Cain. Now, and that's kind of where this story ends.
What is the mark?
Don't know. Don't know. Don't know. Doesn't say. Doesn't say. But it would certainly. It would be the story would communicate that there's something. Again, God is protecting Cain. God is protecting the children of Canaan. Now one of the issues that we're going to find, one of the things to find later, and again we got these stories coming together, and it's coming from a different source. There's going to be another son coming from Adam and Eve, because Cain leaves, and it's going to be Seth, and so it's not, the line isn't as clear, because was the intention in this is to have another. This sure sounds like we are the children of Cain, that we carry that mark, because until then there's nothing but Cain, but then we have Seth, which kind of makes it a little more confusing.
What is the mark that they talk about in these things at the end of time? This mark on.
Well, I think that becomes. That's a really good question, and I think there's every possibility that this is sort of a mirror to that mark. Mm-hmm. This is a mirror. So it's also a mark, but it's from a radically different source. It doesn't become a sign of grace. It becomes a sign of judgment.
You don't mind me asking.
Oh no, I think that's. But you would only see that if you choose to look at the Bible in its totality,
Yeah.
as a unified story, because there's no allusion to this in Revelation. So when they talk about the mark of the beast, they don't refer back to Canaan in Revelation. So
They tattoo people then.
Did they tattoo people then? I don't know. I think they always tattooed people.
I was going to say it's pretty.
Yeah, I think they always did
Didn't
that.
they mark slaves?
Oh yeah. Well, and I gotta believe they were.
Yeah, they did.
They used it to ornament themselves. I mean, my gosh.
There's a lot of medicinal
Yeah.
purposes behind it too.
Oh, yeah.
Back thousands and thousands
Yeah.
and thousands of years.
This is not like going to Bible study. This is like the whole world.
Well,
in this room.
so we've got Cain and Abel. What's the condition of Cain and Abel? Bad, yeah. And for Abel, it's real bad because Abel is in the ground.
Jealous.
Yeah, and Cain is now jealous and angry and a murderer, and he's wandering around and growing stuff with a mark and growing stuff, and it's not going
Verse
on.
2, because God's saying, don't kill this guy, but everybody don't hang out with me.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, don't buy him a drink.
Yeah.
But what becomes interesting is if you look at, and these are other, just I'm going to throw out names because we're talking about names, but we're not going to look at them in any depth. But between this and the next story we'll pick up on, and that's going to be the Noah story, we got a lot of people mentioned. Noah story. We got a lot of people. Because one of the things that you see is the priests, when they write things, and again, they use their own vocabulary. And they use the word El to refer to God. Just like the first chapter of Genesis, that's how they refer to God, as El. And their God seems to be a little more detached than this Lord God. They love, because they're bean counters, and they love less. They love less of who marries whom, and da. And you got all these lists. All the numbers are big to the priests, and there's a lot of stuff. But there are some other names that you may run into, like Enoch. And Enoch is important. And again, I'm throwing out names. Sandy's not here. This is really for her. So don't tell her any of this, okay? Because we don't want her to know.
Stack on the land was lost.
What's that?
Enoch was the slay stack on the land.
All right. Well, that's what it was supposed to be. Yes. Enoch is the one that didn't die. God took into heaven. And that's going to be important in later stuff, because whenever somebody wanted to describe heaven, if I wanted to write a book on heaven, if I say Heaven by Ed Rudiger, Are you going to buy it? What's the first thing you're going to say when you see Heaven by Ed Rudiger? How the heck does he know?
Thinking something similar.
Yeah, John was thinking of something similar, only he was using different language. But how the heck does he know? But if I say Heaven by Enoch, ooh, Enoch went to heaven without dying. I betcha he might be able to write something. You know, so Enoch becomes a real big figure in what's called apocalyptic literature. You know, these visions like John, visions there. So will Elijah, because Elijah didn't die. You know, so these two figures become a big deal in some of the other ancient writings. Okay, so you got Enoch, you got Methuselah, and Methuselah lived a long time. He would never die. You know, he had, kids that wanted the inheritance. And, they looked at him and said, Jesus, he's never going to die. He's going to be around here forever. He gets a cold and then he gets better, And then he falls down 6 steps and they do this, and then he gets better. I'm just throwing these out. So Methuselah lives a long time. So that's a name. Lamech. Oh, Lamech. Ooh, Lamech. Lamech. Ooh, what does Lamech do? Oh.
Come on.
Oh. Well, how am I sounding when I'm describing Lamech? Not good. Lamech invents the sword.
Okay.
Lamech invents the sword. And he says, God, Kurt said if anybody kills Cain, which must be his ancestor, because why would he want to defend him? God said if somebody kills Cain, then he's going to repay a certain number, sevenfold. Seven's a perfect number. They love sevens. Sevenfold. Well, Lamech is saying it's not going to be sevenfold, it's going to be 77. In a sense, he's saying what about himself? I'm bad, and I'm badder than God. Because God is sevenfold, me and my sword. And actually, I think it was a lightsaber. But he does that. Jubilation. What do you think Jubal does? Invents.
I think everybody has.
Drinks.
Celebrate.
Drinks.
Jubal was in
Yeah.
and he had a still.
Yeah. Well, but that's.
Jubal was
But it's.
the other day. Jubal Foster. Does anyone else watch it?
Well, I think for different reasons, you and Chris on the same alcoholic page. And so when we finish, if we finish, let's stay a little while and have a dual intervention, because clearly we need something. Because if your first response is, happy, what makes you happy and cheerful and gay, but in a different way, and the first response is alcohol, we have a problem.
No, I have a choice to make. Do I go out and spread the word that Chris is an alcoholic, or I don't?
Well, Gary, look at no. Do not do that. What we need to do is pray for her. Pray for that God cast out the alcohol demon that has possessed Chris Pierce.
To pray for her because she's an alcoholic.
Yes, that's right. That's different than saying Chris is an alcoholic. When you put pray for her because Chris is an alcoholic, that's a whole different matter.
Pastor Ed said so.
Yes. In fact, I may be soliciting, I will solicit prayers to every bathroom I visit. I will write on it. Pray for Chris. She's an alcoholic. All right. So we've got, but Jubal does not invent alcohol. Jubal invents something that makes us happy. Not fireworks. Music. He makes a harp and the lyre and jeez, you leaves your heart. Man.
She wasn't joking.
That was awesome, Art.
That was not way out.
Yeah. Oh gosh almighty. All right. So, I'm right now, I'm just cutting losses. Right now. We've met some people, right? And we've got to know other people better. We know Adam and Eve, and what is Adam and Eve? Who are Adam and Eve?
They're the first
They are the first
parents on earth.
Yes, but even more important than the first parents,
The first kids to be
they are the first real humans. They are human because they
made a mistake.
they have those frailties that human beings have, which their
But they didn't
son,
know it because they didn't know what frailties were.
they didn't before, they did after. They did after.
Looking at us down here, we're laughing, and their poor souls are up there crying.
His face.
Well, thank you, Art, for bringing us all down. Cain, mark of Cain, fratricide, things are getting worse. Okay, next week.
I can't start a week without this.
Yeah, well, I feel the same way. You've got, Enoch, and you've got Methuselah, and you've got Lamech, and you've got Jubal Foster, and all of them, and you've got random alcoholics that are wandering around now, and we have all totally lost the plot, and it's time to go home, because next week we'll look at Genesis 6 through 8, and we'll look at another character named. No, anybody in Andy Griffith named Noah? I don't think so either. Okay, so Noah. We're not looking at Opie. We're not looking at Opie. Yeah. Why would you name a kid Opie? And was that his real name?
You want him to get picked up.
Yeah. Was it on his birth certificate? Opie? Or was it what they called him? Was his real name?
That was the last word she said before she died after the little kid was born. Opie.
Well, it might have been, she might have been saying, what did he say?
That might have been what she said. Oh, Pete.
Yeah, that could have been. She could have had some kind of an accident there, or she could have been.
She maybe had
It's stuck.
Or she could have been, like caught in a freezer, and she was saying open, but didn't get it before she croaked, So it was OP, and then, yeah. What? OP, what? Okay. So thank you. We have never degenerated to this place. We have completely come off the rail. I'll tell you, listen to me. Listen to me. It wouldn't have happened if Rick had been here. If Rick had been here, it wouldn't have happened. He'd have wouldn't he? He would have kept us straight.
If you ever start selling tickets to get in here, I'll buy one.
Yeah, that's. Or just try to meet out with Jubal Foster. One of the two. All right, let's have a word of prayer and then, go home. Lord God, thank you so much for leading us sort of through this. As we consider these people from Genesis, help us to recognize the role played by Adam and Eve and by Cain and Abel and by these other names, so that when we see them play a part in the story, we understand their meaning. In the name of Christ we pray, Amen. Now,